Hey there. Hi, Judah. So tonight we have with us Judah Rosen, the VP of Customer and Strategy at Watchful, a hot Israeli seed stage startup. Hi, Judah.
Hey, Sean, how you doing today?
Doing amazing. Great to have you on board. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Awesome. So you've been on the forefront of customer success, in enterprise facing companies for the last 10 years or so. Tell me a little bit about your background. I'd love to hear about you.
Sure, of course. And let me just begin by, again, thanking you for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to be talking with you.
Awesome.
Yeah, so my background, I've been involved in customer success, as you mentioned, for the good part of 10 years or so. Doing CS before CS was a thing, before I even knew it was a thing. And then you look back and you're like, oh, wow, it's been 10 years in CS. I've been working with customers from, $40 billion hedge funds to banks and different technology companies in various industries, from, asset management solutions all the way through design, collaboration software, competitive intelligence, performance analytics. So, I've seen a lot, and I've built and managed CS teams, both in-house and global remote teams. And most recently, as you mentioned, I joined a very young technology startup here in Israel called Watchful, working with Fortune 1000 companies and providing some technologies around competitive research. So that's kind of where I've been in the last 10 years or so.
Right. No, that's phenomenal. So, being on the spectrum of being part of these very young companies and these, scale stage startups with, 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees, how do you go from like 10 people to 1,000 employees, and how does customer success practice change along the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's a 2-hour conversation probably in of itself, but we can talk for hours on that. But I think at the end of the day, the maturity and sort of the evolution of the CS org and function within a company is directly correlated and connected to the maturity of the company itself. So, when you're starting out and you're a young startup and you're, a few employees, everyone's doing a lot of things, everyone's wearing multiple hats. You don't have specialty roles, you don't have fancy solutions and software like Zendesk or Salesforce, and you don't have support roles or sales roles, or those roles are just really emerging. So, every dollar in ARR, every customer, and typically those are SMB customers when you're just starting out, they're so important. And the CSM's job is really reactive, and it's just basically putting out fires or helping drive new products and new solutions as the company iterates fast. And I think, the value creation that's happening is really just about driving usage and analytics, right? And driving users. There's very little value creation outside of the software itself. And then as the company matures and starts to, target mid-sized companies and the ARR is more healthy, you start to see specialty roles emerge in the company, and you have performance marketers, and maybe you have a team of AEs and a support team. And now you start to see the CSM freed up a bit to provide a little more value to the customer. So it's not just about the solution, but it's also, doing QBRs and a little more planning with the customers. But still, they're sort of emerging from that reactive nature, and maybe they have some more solutions and tools that they're using to stay more organized and to segment their customers more and focus on the revenue that they really want to grow. And then eventually, as you reach, like you said, 1,000 employees, 2,000, 5,000 employees, and you're working with strategic enterprise accounts, then, you start to see the sales function removed from the CS function. The CSMs become more of business partners, aligning themselves really with the KPIs of the executives that they are supporting. So, you're sort of, it's more transformative, and you're ultimately providing value. The value creation that's happening is way beyond the solution that you're selling or supporting, right? And we can talk about that for hours, but that really is sort of the evolution of a healthy CS practice, just from, sort of selling seats and maintaining seats and supporting those seats and making sure that there are no fires, to providing value that is really more holistic and outside of the solution itself, and aligning yourself with the KPIs of the executives and the champions that you've built.
Right, totally. And maybe more on the side of these strategic clients when you're working with them. What are like some examples of, strategic value of providing them, tapping into the solution and the value? But how do you go the extra mile for them?
Yeah, great question. I think, ultimately, the CSM's job is about building relationships. You're always naturally building relationships with users, with champions, with decision makers, with executives. And, if you have really, really strong relationships, then you can start to talk about things that are, outside of the actual solution, right? And, one thing that sort of I was trained on and is a big part of my CS toolkit, and something that I help other companies with is the success planning, is how to have a session with an executive where you're really just talking about the executive, right? You're not talking about your product. You're not talking about upsell, renewal. You're not talking about any of that stuff. You're just talking about like, hey, Sean, what are some of the key, pain points that you're feeling this quarter? What are some of the challenges that you've been tasked with in this quarter, and how are you evaluated ultimately? And, to have those conversations at a high level, you obviously need those relationships. You need to have a lot of support around you, a lot of support. And, for example, at Envision, where I used to work, for example, a good example is you're talking to a VP of design, and, one of the biggest pain points, especially, a few years ago, and I think it still exists today, is recruiting top designers. And that's always a challenge for any good VP,
Sure.
right? That field, talk about evolving at lightning pace, experienced design. So they're always looking for top talent in design, and that's always a challenge. So, Envision is a design collaboration tool, and our job wasn't to help with recruiting, but if you can align yourself with that struggle, that challenge of the executive, then you're really creating a lot of value that is, as I said, outside of the core solution. And there's different ways to go about that. You can, plan with the marketing team and plan with different specialty teams inside your org to have career events and host branded events together with the customer, either at their, headquarters or an offsite place, and really try to use the community to help align and help them get some resumes through the door, for example. That's just one example, but there are many, many where you could align yourself with, key struggle, a key challenge of the executives that you are supporting and driving value for.
Totally. No, that's brilliant. I mean, they say that you're in a sales process and also customer success, you're relegated to the person you sound like. So if you're like addressing, if the CEO is losing sleep over how are we, recruiting top design talent, and you guys are actually part of that movement and helping them solve that really moves beyond the actual kind of solution to the real strategic value. So that's really
exactly.
cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, so you mentioned Envision. So Envision is a really hot company in the design space, and their CEO, Clark Valberg, most know quite well. He's famous for his whole design. Envision, I know, invested a lot in like this whole space, creating, even filming their own film, design disruptors with voices of design. So it's definitely a company with like a personality, right? A unique personality. Do you find, thinking of like customer success and strategic customer success, did any of that DNA affect, your strategy, your day-to-day operation, how you customer success strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. You mentioned Clark, and obviously, Envision, such a great company to work for, and I learned so much, and it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to have worked for Envision and under Clark, who is really, a unique leader and thinks differently. And if you think about it, like, as I mentioned before, there really is no other role or function inside an org that has transformed at such a pace like experienced designers and digital designers and UI, UX designers. I mean, everything around us has become about the experience. And that role and that function has developed at a lightning pace and has become so pivotal and important in organizations so fast. So of course, you're going to need a company to keep up with that, right? Of course, you're going to need a company to be as innovative and as iterative as the designer that they're supporting and create a whole community around it. And that's exactly what Clark is and has done. And so I think that definitely, you saw elements of that in the CS org as well, the maturity of the org, of the CS org, to be able to be innovative. And I think we were, I think the CS leadership was definitely innovative in its time. And you mentioned design disruptors and other initiatives that Clark took on. It really became about the community and how to support the community and how to drive value just beyond the solution, right? And I think ultimately at the when I left Envision, the things I was involved with and that I was doing was really, of course I was doing CS different tasks and building relationships and strategic mapping and driving usage and adoption and all that. But it was really more about success planning with VPs of design and executives to be able to offer these programs that Clark created and to position ourselves as real subject matter experts in the field. And that was so important for designers because they were thirsty for that, for those opportunities. They were thirsty for that value because they had no time they were so busy recruiting and their role was evolving and, they didn't know what was what. And so you had a company that was on the forefront, and to be able to offer those kinds of programs and that value meant so much to the executives. And we really positioned ourselves, as I said, like the subject matter experts and the business partners, the strategic business partners together with the customers. And that ultimately creates more value for everybody, right? Creates more value for the customers, it creates more value for the users, and ultimately more value for the company that you're working for. So yeah, I mean, for sure, Envision was a very unique place and I learned a tremendous amount.
Awesome. Would you say that what differentiates like the top CS to the kind of whatever the more middling ones, are there like specific characteristics like that you see from you don't even know the company that well, like okay, these guys are doing CS right, or no, those guys are just like focusing on selling seats and upselling and churn, that's it?
Yeah. So what's the question specifically? I'm sorry.
Like, I mean, what kind of differentiates amazing CS org from like, just like another boring one, I would say.
I mean, ultimately it comes down to the people, right? The folks that you've recruited to be as, part of the CS org. And, I think, as I mentioned earlier, my journey was, it's very similar to many CSMs where we find ourselves in different industries every few years. From performance analytics to design collaboration software to competitive intelligence solutions. And so, there could be the sense of imposter syndrome, because you have to be the subject matter expert ultimately. And I think what sets really excellent CSMs, from just regular good CSMs is the ability to self-educate and the ability to throw yourself into the industry and build relationships with customers to ask them, about their challenges and about their industry and learn from the customers. Ultimately, if you can hire and recruit people who are thirsty to learn and who are great self-educators and who are masters at relationship building, no matter what they did before, you're likely going to be able to develop and build a really, really strong and effective CS org. Because you have to be able to learn and adapt and grow in every industry that you find yourself in. And that's not always easy. Like who is Judah to be, leading a class on design thinking to a large bank, with, dozens of UX designers. But if you have the right programs in place, and ultimately if you're asking the right questions to the customers and learning, you could do that, and you could be really, really effective.
Totally. So you have to be the, to summarize, chameleon who gets in there and then within a short amount of time, knows more about the industry and the space customers.
Yeah. I think ultimately you just, you're trying to recruit CSMs who have that that thirst, but ultimately who are also great at relationship building and could be comfortable talking to executives.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's phenomenal. So you mentioned, kind of one of your, toolkits and approaches with CS is the success planning that you would do with executives. So like, for example, Envision, they have some really big enterprise customers like Netflix, Twitter. What does that actually look like? What does your methodology, comprise of? If you can share with us, obviously, your secret sauce.
Well, I don't think it's a secret. I think, every company and every organization is different. I think I've used a few different methodologies, different companies. At Envision, they were really strong on MedPick on the sales side. And I think elements of that definitely trickle down to the CS org. Like ultimately, as you evolve and become more strategic, and really drive different sets of values, it comes down to relationships. The relationships you have with your customers and the relationships you have with your colleagues. Because, let's say internally with your colleagues, you have to develop relationships with the AEs and with the marketing team and with the support team and different specialists who support those organizations. And you start to approach problems and accounts as a team and in a more strategic way. So the account planning you're doing is not just about, okay, what's our usage? Are we red, yellow, or green? It's about, which business units are using this, this solution? How can we paint the picture? How can we sell the vision and the story of why other business units should also be using these solutions, and really telling the story to the executive as to why, having different teams and different business units on these solutions would ultimately benefit them. I think that story really remains part of I think the task there is on the AE and the sellers to be able to do that. And the CSM is creating the right relationships to be able to facilitate that and to drive the right value, and always to be creating champions and testing those champions. So I think, long answer, but it has to do, the methodology is really about relationships. And if you have the right relationships internally and with your customers, then, you feel comfortable saying, hey, can we just have a session where we talk about, the executive, and, some of your challenges this quarter, and not just about the solution, but, here's why and here's how we could help. And I think if you can have those kinds of conversations at that level, that's obviously where you want to be, Totally.
And how does this translate into tools or different, pieces that you guys, I know there's all kinds of systems for customer success, like there's what's the other one, the other big one,
Gainsight.
Forget the name. So there's a few of those, or I know there's obviously where does this kind of happen? Is this happening in your head? Is this in a spreadsheet, in a PowerPoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, all those tools and the tool stack of a CSM, I think changes with time and as you mature, from a startup all the way to enterprise, and the value creation you're driving and the relationships you're building. like those tools are great for segmentation and maintaining organization within your own accounts. Tools like Gainsight, obviously Salesforce, so important. It becomes the DNA of a company, really. But as you become more strategic, those tools become less and less sticky, because it's not just about color-coded health, and it's less about the analytics and usage and more about strategic planning and as I mentioned, relationship building and building champions. And I don't think there's a tool on the market that can really capture all that. First, I would say, personally, in my job now and, as a CS, but definitely now, I would say 90% of my job right now is writing. I just write all the time. I find myself writing, account plans, customer stories, blog posts. I write website content. Of course, you write emails, you draft proposals and contracts. And the majority of my time is probably spent writing. But I think there's no tool stack for strategic planning. I think you have to have, we use Google Slides and Google Sheets to sort of present the org map. We did a lot of like LinkedIn research, and obviously, and sometimes, by the way, we just presented the map to our customers on a Google slide and said, hey, this is our best guess as to what your org looks like and where the different champions might be. Can you help us out? And if you have those right relationships, you'll likely get a lot of input from your own customers, because it's in their vested interest to help you as well most of the time. So you want to build the org map, and then you take that back and you have success planning sessions and with executives, but you also have planning sessions with your own team to decide, okay, where are we going to head? What's our strategy here? This business unit, they don't even know about us. There's a lot of education. How do we get into that business unit, right? What's our entry point? How are we going to educate them? How are we going to show them the benefits of using the solution like team A, B, and C, right? So, there's different templates that we've used for success planning, which I think were developed by Motorola, if I'm not mistaken, back in the day, and it's sort of evolved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sort of evolved. I think LinkedIn made it a thing. And a lot of our CS leadership came from LinkedIn, so it sort of morphed and evolved into what we used. But there's templates that you could use for success planning, which operate more on, what's the specific goal of the company and the strategies and measures that you're going to take to be able to achieve those goals and align yourself as a business partner. So, the OGSM framework, I think it's called, that was a success planning template model that many companies use, but ultimately it just comes down to aligning yourself with what the company's main goals and KPIs are. So as you become more mature, less on the toolkit, more on the relationship building side, and more strategic planning with your team.
Absolutely. And do you have any specific methodology around like QBRs or templates that you recommend, or is it like kind of every quarter is something new?
Yeah, I mean, you try to follow a template, and having playbooks is always important when you're starting out. You don't want to spend too much time recreating the wheel over and over again. There's tons of templates online you can find from various companies, I'm sure, on SlideShare and who knows what, that have great templates. But ultimately, you're just trying to focus. You're trying to shape the story of what was the last quarter. What were your goals? What have we done? What have we achieved together? And what does the future look like? If you can shape that story, tell that story through a QBR, all the merrier.
Awesome. So yeah, you mentioned, strategic CS is all about the relationship. So Ziv Peled, the chief customer officer at AppFire, is all about this, and I think he has his own system for measuring the quality. How do you have any of your own approach around that of tracking that or measuring that, or like how do you know if the relationship with this bank is fantastic and that other massive bank is lukewarm? How do you know that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's I know Ziv well, and I think he's also an innovative CS leader. And I think the work you're mentioning, the work he's doing is really important to be able to capture and map relationship building and relationships rather. So yeah, I mean, actually, I joined a few sessions of Zeev, and you learned a lot about that, and sort of built that into our own practice at Watchful. Ultimately, I mentioned color coding accounts. We actually try to color code relationships as well, and we try to base it in as much data as possible instead of just gut feel. Although gut feel is always there and always important. But we try to, base it in data in terms of, will they take a one-on-one phone call from the CEO, or will when you visit them in California, how is that? What's the reception like, right? Are they taking you around the office? Are they giving you the time of day? Are you able to have dinner with them? Are you talking about things outside of work, around their own interests, their own hobbies? And have you tested them? Testing champions, always important. And to be able to learn how to do that effectively is a skill in of itself, and an important one at that. But we're trying to capture now all that into Salesforce. And we have bi-weekly sessions, with the management, talking about each customer, and not only the customer, but about the relationships we have within that customer. And who's ultimately a champion, who is going to give us a customer story, and who's going to help us shape the product. And having those conversations early and often are super important. And to be able to capture that, every company can have their own secret sauce, but we try to base it as much data points as we can, as well as our gut feel, and also having more than one person's perspective on that relationship is also important, because if that person, God forbid, gets hit by a bus, that perspective might be incorrect, right? So you want to have different people giving their 2 cents
Absolutely.
on where they see how they see the relationship developing. But I think those are important factors in sort of mapping that and being able to deliver off of that.
Absolutely. So now that you're at Watchful and kind of very ground level, breaking in and building up a CS practice, like how do you approach this at such an early stage? And then also, like, how would you say on the spectrum of enterprise? Is it like very enterprisey? Is it kind of like mid-market, or what kind of market are you guys in?
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke before about companies developing from FMBs into strategic accounts. And Watchful was sort of it's more backwards, and we've been blessed to already be working with Fortune 100 customers
Oh, wow.
with competitive intelligence solutions. So a lot of the work I was doing at Envision and previously with other strategic accounts are very much in play here. I think my role now is a little more broad. It's building the CS practice and the foundations of it, managing the relationships with customers, but more about also driving product growth and go-to-market strategy and developing that a bit more. I think we lean on our customers a lot right now to help shape our products, but we have the challenge of supporting those enterprise customers while being able to do that, which is always a challenge. And so, I think I mentioned before, we're trying to become subject matter experts. And ultimately, that's what's going to set us apart from everyone else. And that's what's going to be able to give us the ability to drive value beyond the solution at a certain point. And we're just leaning on our customers a lot at this point to help us get there. To not be afraid to learn and ask why, right? Why is this the way this is? And the customers ultimately want to help you, and they want to bring you into their world, and they want to teach you, and they want to educate you. So we're just in the process of being educated about the industry, and we are sort of creating our own industry. When people see our technology, they're like, wow, I never knew this even existed. And it obviously has its own challenges, but it's exciting. But there's so much we can learn from our customers. So, we're, as I said, we're supporting our customers and helping drive value. and we're learning so much about them and about their needs to be able to shape our own products.
Absolutely. Wow. This is phenomenal seeing, kind of the spectrum of, working with like really embryonic startups to like, to dealing with Fortune 100s and building that whole process. So we've learned a ton in these few minutes. Can you share with us any leaders in the CS space, any book which is like your Bible, anything we should be doing to really dive in?
Yeah, well, the Bible's my Bible. CS leaders. I mean, yeah, of course, there's lots of books out there and lots of articles, and I'm always reading. And I think actually the CS space is really interesting because I think that there are so many great leaders, and more importantly, there's such a strong community. And I think that ultimately you want to be able to learn and build the community that you're, where you find yourself, and to be able to pull out value from the community that you're in. I read a lot of business books and entrepreneurial books and books about entrepreneurism, and I'm also learning a lot about the competitive intelligence industry, which I think is important. But I'm always reading articles about, from different community members inside Israel. And I think we have our own leaders sort of emerging. And I think that would be my advice is wherever you find yourself, whatever city you find yourself, I don't think there's one book that's going to teach you about, being a CSM and being a gifted CSM. Maybe there is, I just don't know about it. I think it's ultimately about learning from your colleagues and from the community that you happen to be in. And there's tons of meetups and online forums where you can participate and learn from. So that's sort of what I've been doing, and it's been great to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Judah, this is phenomenal. You really gave us a glimpse and I don't know if a crash course, but at least a taste, and we definitely want some more. Really appreciate your time and all your advice here for us. A lot of our community of, we have sellers, we have people who do customer success that are part of the Chartloop community, and this can really be, tremendous in kind of giving a perspective and learning some new strategies and approaches around this.
Of course, happy to help, and thanks for the opportunity, and best of luck to you and to Chartloop. It's really amazing to see the trajectory so far.
Thank you.
Wishing you guys much success.
Amazing, thank you, and to you too. We're gonna be following you closely. Thanks, Judah. Check out our channel for a lot more awesome content on strategic sales and a lot more. Have a good one.